In the world of bar rescue, no one is safe when Jon Taffer steps in. When bar owners push him to the edge, what follows is an unforgettable storm of fury and truth. Brace yourself as Jon unleashes his wrath, destroying those who dare to stand in the way of his rescue. Can you handle the destruction? But you won't believe what went down at George and Dragon. This was one of those episodes where Jon Taffer was on a whole different level, and it was all about the epic showdown between Jon and that bar owner. It was wild, and it felt like a full-on battle. So there was Jon Taffer, rolling up in his SUV, probably already knowing he was about to tear this place apart. The George and Dragon was drowning in debt, a sinking ship that the owner seemed oblivious to. What made it even worse was that this wasn't just any bar, it was his mother's legacy, a place she had worked so hard to build.
He's in debt $700,000. He's losing $5,000 a month.
Yet, instead of fighting to save it, the owner was off gambling, risking everything she had left behind. Oh my god, can you believe it? He was throwing away her dreams at a poker table while the bar crumbled under the weight of unpaid bills and neglect.
See, his kitchen is a hole, his bar's a disorganized mess.
Now, as if the bar's condition wasn't bad enough, Jon discovered something that made his blood boil even more. The owner had been spending his time playing poker instead of running the business. Oh my god, can you believe it? While his bar was falling apart around him, this guy was off gambling, completely neglecting his responsibilities.
Oh, no. It looked like poker night tonight. Well, yeah, we have a poker on Tuesday, Wednesday.
Jon was fuming when he found out, and he wasn't about to let that slide. He tore into the owner, asking him how he could possibly justify wasting time at a poker table while his bar was on the brink of collapse. Can you believe that? Jon was livid, and it only made the showdown between them even more intense.
You like poker, don't you?
Yeah, I play the World Series every year, so
I can see, because this is obviously your choice.
Walked in, you could feel the tension building up in the air. Jon wasn't just walking into a bar, he was stepping right into the lion's den. The George and Dragon was a complete mess. The place was run down, customers were barely hanging on, and the staff? They looked like they had given up a long time ago. But the real problem, the real dragon that needed taming, was the owner himself. Oh my god, can you believe it?
There's nothing going on in here.
Now, Jon wasn't one to hold back, and you know he wasn't going to let this owner slide. He started grilling him, going straight for the jugular. Jon was pointing out everything wrong with the place, the nasty smells, the filthy floors, and let's not even start on the kitchen. The owner, though, he was getting defensive, like he was ready to go toe-to-toe with Jon. Can you believe that?
So you've been running this place for 21 years?
Yes, I have.
What is this?
This dude was actually standing there, trying to justify the mess his bar was in, like Jon wasn't seeing it with his own eyes. The confrontation was heating up, with Jon and the owner standing there, practically nose to nose. Jon was laying into him, telling him how he was running his business straight into the ground. It was brutal. You could see the fire in Jon's eyes, and the owner?
This stove!
Is there any food on there?
You have a flame and you have grease. Fire!
Well, he was fighting back, but you could tell he was losing ground. Jon was throwing facts and hard truths at him like punches, and the owner was barely holding on. Oh my god, it was so intense. And the owner, he was trying to come up with excuses, but Jon wasn't having any of it. He was relentless, tearing into every excuse, every lame attempt to defend the state of the bar, and you could tell Jon was on a mission, and he wasn't leaving until this guy either owned up or broke down. Can you believe that?
Then go home tonight and look in the mirror and stare in your own eyes.
The owner started getting really agitated, his voice rising as he tried to push back against Jon's attacks. But Jon was having none of it. He wasn't just talking to the owner, he was shouting, demanding answers, demanding responsibility. The bar owner was shaking, clearly rattled, but still trying to put up a front. It was like watching a storm crash into a mountain. Jon was the storm, relentless and unstoppable. And the owner? He was the mountain that was starting to crumble.
Even talk to him. He's not worth your time.
At one point, the owner snapped, yelling back at Jon, saying Jon didn't know what it was like, that it wasn't his fault. Can you believe that? He actually tried to shift the blame, like Jon wasn't about to call him out on every single thing. Jon's face went stone cold, and you knew this was the moment things were about to explode.
It's a responsibility to your employees, to your community.
The tension at George and Dragon reached a boiling point when the owner, already overwhelmed by debt and stress, began taking out his frustration on the chef. In a fit of anger, he started shouting at the poor chef. Can you believe it? The chef, who was just trying to do his job, became the target of the owner's misplaced rage.
All of that, you're expecting to be deployed in the next 6 months or so.
The owner's voice echoed through the bar as he unleashed a torrent of insults, pouring all his anger onto the one person who was still trying to hold things together. It was an awful display of misdirected anger, and it only made the situation even more unbearable.
This is not his pub, but it's your mess!
Don't get me.
Oh my god, the nerve of this guy. But Jon wasn't backing down, he was only getting more fired up.
To do obviously, they're not doing the job I want them to do.
So you hire people to do.
Jon wasn't just tearing into him, he was ripping him apart. The owner was floundering, trying to defend himself, but Jon's words were hitting like a sledgehammer. The owner's face was turning red, but he was still trying to argue, still trying to stand his ground. But you could see it, he was cracking. He knew he was in over his head, and Jon was not letting him off the hook.
You're not gambling with your money, you're gambling with your mother's legacy.
Pretty much.
And that's why that.
As the heated argument reached its peak, Jon could barely stand the owner's dismissive tone and utter lack of responsibility. Every word the owner spat out, every excuse he made was like fuel to the fire that was already blazing inside Jon. The filth in the kitchen, the debt piling up, and the owner's refusal to acknowledge his role in the disaster were all too much for Jon to tolerate. He had seen enough, and it was clear to him that this was a lost cause unless something drastic changed.
Properly.
How do you be in the business for 21 years and not know anything?
Jon finally reached his breaking point and decided it was time to walk away, leaving the owner standing there in stunned silence. He made it clear that there was no helping someone who refused to take responsibility for their own mess. The kitchen needed to be cleaned, and the owner had to get his act together before Jon would even consider returning. The gravity of the situation weighed heavily in the air as the owner slowly began to realize the seriousness of his predicament.
But I'm not.
I can't help you, buddy. You clean your frickin' kitchen and I'll come back.
With that, Jon turned and left the bar, leaving the owner to face the reality of the mess he had created. It wasn't just the dirty kitchen or the debt, it was the owner's stubbornness and lack of accountability that had driven Jon to this point. He wasn't coming back until the owner took responsibility and made the necessary changes. For now, the rescue was off the table, and the fate of George and Dragon was left hanging by a thread. But things got even more crazier in this next episode right here.
Now I degraded you. How do you like it?
The Triple Nickel Tavern was about to become the scene of one of the most chaotic bar rescues ever witnessed. Jon Taffer, the master of bar transformations, was sitting in his car, eyes locked on the chaos unfolding inside the bar. The surveillance footage playing on his screen was enough to make anyone cringe, but Jon? He was furious.
Anymore? I swear. Oh, you're burning my arm.
He knew things were bad, but what he was seeing now was on a whole different level. The bar owner wasn't just irresponsible, he was out of control, behaving like an absolute fool in what was supposed to be his own establishment. This wasn't just a business on the brink of failure, it was a disaster waiting to happen.
Guys, 100 times.
You wanna pull my hair again? Pull my hair, go ahead.
He's instigating.
As Jon watched from his car, he couldn't believe the antics of the bar owner. This guy was supposed to be the one setting an example, but instead, he was the source of all the madness. The bar was a complete circus, with the owner at the center acting like a total jerk. He wasn't just messing around. He was throwing kicks, getting into ridiculous fights with his staff, and showing not an ounce of professionalism. Oh my god, can you believe it? Jon was seething, his frustration growing with every second that passed.
What happened?
Inside the Triple Nickel Tavern, the scene was pure chaos. It was obvious that the owner had no control over the bar, and worse, he didn't seem to care. Jon was watching this train wreck unfold, his anger building as he saw the owner throwing himself into one ridiculous situation after another.
I'm gonna you up.
He degrades his manager, fights with his staff.
Instead of managing the bar, the guy was acting like a punk, starting fights and kicking like he was in some kind of street brawl. Can you believe that? It was unreal, and Jon knew that stepping in wasn't going to be easy. The more Jon watched, the more it became clear that the owner was completely unfit to run this bar. The staff looked like they were at their breaking point, trying to keep things together while their boss was acting like a total clown. As the night went on, the owner's behavior only got worse. He was stumbling around, slurring his words, and picking fights. Jon could hardly believe what he was seeing. The owner was completely unhinged, and it was clear that he had no respect for his staff, his customers, or his own business. Jon was fuming in his car, knowing that when he finally walked through those doors, there was gonna be hell to pay. The moment finally came when Jon couldn't take it anymore. He slammed the door of his car and stormed toward the bar, ready to confront the owner. The scene inside was even worse up close. The owner was in the middle of another one of his ridiculous tantrums, yelling and throwing kicks like he was in some kind of bizarre street fight. Jon's presence didn't go unnoticed, but the owner was too far gone to care. He was acting like a complete idiot, oblivious to the fact that his behavior was driving his business into the ground.
I'm going in there. This is too degrading to watch.
Jon watched in disbelief as the owner continued to act out, completely ignoring the fact that the bar was falling apart around him. The staff was trying to pick up the pieces, but it was clear that they were just as fed up as Jon. The owner was supposed to be leading them, but instead, he was making their lives hell. Jon's patience was wearing thin, and it was only a matter of time before he exploded. Jon could see that the situation was hopeless. The owner wasn't just irresponsible, he was toxic, and his behavior was poisoning the entire bar. The staff was walking on eggshells, afraid to set him off, while the customers were looking for the nearest exit. Jon knew that this was a bar that needed saving, but first, the owner had to be put in his place. And Jon was more than ready to do it.
Degrading him in front of everyone. Who here thought he was a jerk for doing that to him?
Jon didn't waste any time. He laid into the owner, telling him exactly what he thought of his behavior. The owner tried to defend himself, but Jon wasn't having it. He tore him apart, pointing out every single thing that was wrong with the way he was running his bar. The staff, the customers, the state of the bar, it was all on him. And Jon wasn't about to let him off the hook. Jon's words were like a slap in the face. And for the first time, the owner seemed to realize just how deep in trouble he was. And then, it happened. In a moment that no one in the bar could have seen coming, Jon took a step that left everyone in stunned silence. What came next? You wouldn't believe it unless you saw it.
Started it and then degraded him. Now I degraded you.
Jon didn't just confront the owner, he decided to give him a taste of his own medicine. With the same intensity and rage that the owner had shown his staff, Jon unleashed a torrent of fury that left the owner reeling.
He's an ass. You're an ass. You want me to fix your ass in your bar?
Jon's voice thundered through the bar as he treated the owner with the same disdain and disrespect that had been directed at the employees all night. Jon was raging with anger, and he made sure the owner felt every ounce of it. Jon was absolutely livid with the owner from the moment he started surveilling the bar from his car. The owner's reckless behavior, his degrading treatment of the staff, and his complete disregard for the bar's success pushed Jon to his breaking point. Jon's anger only intensified as he witnessed the owner's antics escalate, fighting with his employees, acting like a fool, and failing to show even a shred of professionalism.
Ed, do it, ass.
Put me on the phone. This is getting awkward.
Lay down on the.
The state of the Triple Nickel Tavern was nothing short of appalling. The bar was a chaotic mess, reflecting the owner's lack of care and responsibility. The place was poorly managed, with staff walking on eggshells and customers cringing at the sight of the owner's wild antics. The bar had become a breeding ground for unprofessionalism and disrespect, and it was clear that without drastic changes, there was no hope for its survival. But wait till you see the drama unfold in this next episode right here.
Bottle caps. How many bottle beers have you sold tonight? I don't know. Guess. Give me a number. 10?
Jon Taffer had seen plenty of bars in terrible condition, but from the moment he began surveilling Royal Oaks, he knew this one was in a league of its own. The chaos inside was palpable, radiating out of the building like heat waves. The state of the bar wasn't just bad, it was catastrophic, and it started with the owner Louis. Louis was a walking disaster, constantly yelling at his staff, customers, and anyone who dared to cross his path. His voice echoed through the bar, a constant barrage of noise that left everyone on edge. Louis' complete lack of concern for the bar's well-being was evident in every action he took or failed to take. The place was falling apart under his so-called leadership, and it was clear that he had no idea, or worse, didn't care. Jon had seen enough to know that things were bad, but he needed to be sure, so he sent in his spy recons. These undercover operatives were seasoned professionals, used to handling tough situations, but even they were shocked by what they encountered inside Royal Oaks. The bar was in such a state of disarray that it was more than just unpleasant, it was unsafe.
So look at this.
My recon spies are so uncomfortable.
The filth, the disorder, and the chaotic atmosphere created by Louis' constant yelling made the bar feel like a ticking time bomb. The spies were on edge from the moment they stepped inside, and it wasn't long before they felt they had no choice but to leave. They couldn't risk their safety in a place where the owner's neglect had turned the environment toxic.
Atmosphere and the things on the walls and things like that, it's just not a good look for a bar.
Jon's frustration was simmering just below the surface as he listened to his spies' accounts. He had dealt with bad bars before, but this was something else entirely. Louis' behavior was pushing the bar beyond the brink, and Jon knew he couldn't wait any longer to intervene.
Could you imagine if your house was on the line and this is how your brother was acting?
But just as he was preparing to make his move, Louis did something so outrageous, so completely beyond the realm of rational behavior, that it shocked even Jon. Whatever Louis had done, it was the final straw, and Jon knew he had to step in right then and there.
I'm not gonna let this happen here. I'm going inside. Okay, I'm going to work.
Can you believe that? That was unbelievable. When Jon stormed into Royal Oaks, he was ready for a fight. The atmosphere inside the bar was even worse than he had imagined. The place was a wreck, a chaotic mess, and a stench that clung to everything like a bad memory. But it wasn't just the physical state of the bar that enraged Jon, it was the attitude of the man who was supposed to be in charge. Louis, the owner, was completely unbothered by the disaster around him. He was still yelling, still carrying on as if nothing was wrong, completely oblivious to the fact that his bar was on the verge of collapse. As Jon confronted him, laying out the serious issues facing Royal Oaks, Louis seemed to be in another world. He was so wrapped up in his own ego, his own nonsense, that Jon's words barely registered. It was like trying to talk sense to a brick wall. Louis didn't seem to understand or care about the reality of his situation. He had no clue how deep in debt he was, and his antics were beyond belief. Jon could feel his frustration turning into anger as Louis continued to wave him off, completely detached from the seriousness of the situation. It was infuriating to watch a man so clearly in denial about the disaster he had created.
I don't know. I don't have anything to do with the business end of this.
We don't make money in the next couple months.
But Louis wasn't the only problem. His brother Jon was just as bad, if not worse. As Jon tried to get through to Louis, Jon started to act out, his behavior rapidly spiraling out of control. Jon was drunk, hammered really, and his drunken state only made his actions more disgusting. He was loud, obnoxious, and completely disrespectful, throwing out insults like they were nothing and treating the entire situation like a joke. Jon's behavior was not just unprofessional, it was downright toxic. He was dragging the entire bar down with his antics, and he didn't seem to care.
You should wear a ball cap to hide the ball spot.
So is he this much of a jerk all the time?
Jon was trying to keep his cool, but the more Jon talked, the harder it became. Jon was trash-talking Jon, throwing out slurs and disrespectful comments, and Jon could feel his patience wearing thin. Jon didn't care about the bar, didn't care about the business, and certainly didn't care about the people who depended on it for their livelihood. He was too far gone in his drunken haze to see the damage he was doing. Jon knew he was dealing with a man who had no interest in saving the bar. Jon was too hammered, too out of it, to even understand what was at stake. As Jon looked around the bar, he saw the toll that Louis and Jon's behavior was taking on everyone else. The staff were walking on eggshells, clearly terrified of setting off either brother. The customers, those who were brave enough to stick around, were cringing at the sight of the owner's wild antics.
Joke to you, then tell me, because it's not a joke to me. And that means you don't take your pants.
The bar was supposed to be a place where people could relax and enjoy themselves, but instead, it had become a breeding ground for unprofessionalism and disrespect. It was clear to Jon that without drastic changes, there was no hope for Royal Oaks.
Then drink it, ass.
It's a better looking face than yours.
Can you believe the way Jon spoke to Jon? Oh my god, that was insane. Jon finally reached his breaking point. He couldn't stand by and watch any longer the constant yelling, the disrespect, the sheer disregard for everything that Royal Oaks could have been. He was done trying to reason with men who were too far gone in their own delusions to see what was happening around them. Jon was losing his mind, and he wasn't going to stand by and let these two brothers destroy what was left of the bar.
Hey, shut the up. Go sit down in the corner like a child.
But even as Jon made the decision to leave, Jon wasn't done. No, he wanted to keep going, to keep pushing Jon's buttons.
Laughable, right? The ultimate jerk as he loses his...
He was still drunk, still hammered, and still completely oblivious to the mess he was creating. Jon was still drinking, still taking shots, and still behaving like a complete jerk. He didn't care that Jon was done with them. He was too far gone in his own drunken haze to realize the opportunity they were throwing away.
Listen to him. Tonight, him, I'm drinking. I don't give a...
Jon knew that Royal Oaks was beyond saving, at least under the current ownership. The toxic environment that Louis and Jon had created was suffocating any chance the bar had of survival. As Jon walked out of the bar, the weight of the situation hung heavy on his shoulders. He knew there was no saving a place that didn't want to be saved. Louis and Jon were too blind, too arrogant, and too self-destructive to see that they were the ones pulling the bar down. The sad truth was that Royal Oaks was sinking, and there was nothing more Jon could do to stop it. That was one hell of an episode, right? If you think that was crazy, wait until you see what awaits you next. From the very moment Jon Taffer and Elise, the wife of one of the owners, Todd Chester, parked outside Mac and Chester's SRO, it was clear that they were in for a nightmarish ride. They were sitting in Jon's car, watching the chaos unfold in real time, and it was worse than anything they could have imagined. Jon had seen some pretty wild things in his time, but what was happening outside the bar was on another level of insanity. The bikers were out of control, treating the bar's front yard like it was their personal playground. The scene was pure madness. These guys were causing a ruckus, creating one hell of a scene, and it was obvious that Todd, who should have been managing the situation, was not just failing to control the chaos, but he seemed to be enjoying it.
6 bikers inside will chase away the 60.
Yeah.
Who after a game...
The situation went from bad to worse when they got the bright idea to start burning a picnic table. Yes, you heard that right. They were actually setting furniture on fire right there in front of the bar.
Hey, Benji, get her going.
Elise's eyes widened in shock, and Jon couldn't believe what he was seeing either. The flames were licking up the wood, the fire crackling in the night air, and Todd, instead of stepping in to stop the madness, was smiling. Can you believe that? He was actually grinning, as if watching his bar being turned into a bonfire was the highlight of his night.
Hands up!
Your husband.
It was like he was getting a kick out of watching the bar burn, literally and figuratively. The whole thing was so absurd that it was almost like a scene out of some twisted movie, but this was real life, and Todd was the lead actor in this bizarre, self-destructive drama. After witnessing Todd's chaotic behavior and the utter madness that unfolded outside the bar, things took an even uglier turn when he started disrespecting the other owner, Scott Mack. Scott had been trying to keep some semblance of order amidst the chaos, but Todd wasn't having it. His disrespect was beyond words. He was talking down to Scott like he was nothing, throwing snide remarks and completely dismissing his attempts to bring some sanity to the situation. Scott, who had already seen enough of the madness outside, couldn't stand it anymore. The nonsense, the insanity, the total lack of professionalism, it was all too much. He was done, completely fed up with the antics that were destroying their bar. Watching Todd burn everything down, both literally and figuratively, was more than Scott could handle, and he knew he couldn't stick around for one more minute of it.
But I don't want to be in the atmosphere that he's creating with that side of the bar.
The situation outside continued to spiral out of control. After the picnic table was reduced to ashes, you'd think that would be the end of it, right? But oh no, the madness didn't stop there. You do not want to miss what followed next. The tires squealed, the engines roared, and the table shook under the force of the bikes. It was absolute mayhem, and the most unbelievable part? Todd was still standing there watching, completely unbothered. In fact, he looked like he was having the time of his life.
I remember my brain!
Who would want to bring their family?
Jon was in disbelief. How could a bar owner just stand by and watch as his business was literally going up in smoke? Elise was sitting next to Jon, probably feeling a mix of horror and frustration. Here she was, having called in bar rescue to save their failing business, and her husband was out there acting like a complete idiot, smiling as the bar was being destroyed right in front of his eyes.
You understand how this will chase people away?
Yeah.
So it's either this or your family.
Jon's patience was wearing thin, and it was only a matter of time before he decided he couldn't sit back and watch this madness any longer. Finally, Jon had seen enough. He couldn't just sit there and watch the bar get wrecked by a bunch of rowdy bikers while Todd laughed it off. He decided to confront Todd and let him know exactly what he thought about his reckless behavior.
Fight for your family. This is absurd.
Jon got out of the car, and you could feel the tension rising as he made his way over to Todd. Jon was fuming. He couldn't believe what was happening, and he was ready to let Todd have it. When Jon approached Todd, the first thing he noticed was that Todd was completely hammered. It was clear that he wasn't in any state to have a rational conversation, but Jon wasn't going to let that stop him.
Do these burnouts and applaud, and we're watching you act like a
Jon started telling Todd how his attitude and behavior were not only unprofessional, but were driving the bar into the ground. He couldn't wrap his head around how Todd could be so careless when they were losing $6,000 a month. $6,000. And what was Todd doing to save his business? He was out there watching burnouts on the bar's tables and laughing it off like it was some kind of joke.
Do you think that you can make money by burning your own furniture?
The absurdity of it all was enough to drive anyone mad, and Jon was right on the edge. He could feel his blood boiling as he tried to get through to Todd, but Todd wasn't having any of it. Todd, being the total jerk that he was, started talking back to Jon, slurring his words and acting like a complete ass. He was so far gone, so drunk and delusional, that he couldn't see how his actions were destroying the bar.
Listen to me. You're your family. Because you look at me.
Todd started to get aggressive, his body language shifting as if he was ready to take a swing at Jon. The tension was at an all-time high. Oh my god, can you believe it? It was like watching a train wreck in slow motion. Jon was there to help, but Todd was acting like he wanted to fight him instead. It wasn't just the burnouts, the burned furniture, or the out-of-control bikers. It was Todd's whole attitude, his complete disregard for his business, his disrespect toward Jon, and the fact that he was so hammered that he was ready to get into a physical fight with the very man who was trying to save his bar. Jon was beyond frustrated, he was downright furious. Elise watched as the situation escalated, probably feeling like she was stuck in some kind of nightmare. This was her husband, the man who was supposed to be a responsible business owner, acting like a total fool in front of the guy who had come to rescue them. The whole situation was a disaster, and Jon knew he couldn't do anything more.
Knock it off!
Jon finally made the decision to walk away. He couldn't help someone who wasn't willing to help themselves, and Todd was clearly not interested in saving the bar. He was more interested in causing chaos, burning furniture, and getting into fights. Jon had seen enough, and he knew that staying any longer would just be a waste of time. Todd was unreasonable, violent, and completely out of control, and Jon wasn't about to stick around and let things get any worse. As Jon walked away from the bar, you could feel the weight of the situation hanging in the air. This was supposed to be a rescue mission, but instead, it had turned into a nightmare. Jon was done trying to reason with Todd, done trying to save a bar that was being destroyed from the inside out. He knew that Mac and Chester's SRO was in serious trouble, but with an owner like Todd, there was nothing more he could do. Todd was determined to ruin his bar, and Jon couldn't stop him.
Todd is the catalyst to the failure here, and he proved it tonight.
The whole episode was a testament to how far gone Mac and Chester's SRO had become. The bar wasn't just failing because of bad management, it was being actively destroyed by its own owner. Todd was more interested in causing chaos and having a good time than in running a successful business, and that attitude had pushed the bar to the brink of collapse.
And he's acting like a fool. I'm gonna get the hell out of here.
Jon had seen plenty of bad situations in his time, but this one was different. This was a bar that was being torn apart by the very person who was supposed to be saving it, and there was nothing Jon could do to stop it. Now, this next bar may not have had horses or motorcycles come in, but it did have an owner who was leading it to closure. The Dugout Sports Bar and Grill in Chicago was owned by Ed Cressy, who was absolutely clueless about his business. While Cressy started off as the landlord of the building, he had to take over the business when his tenants failed to pay their rent. In hindsight, this man should have continued to be a landlord over an owner. Even though this bar would receive a surge of customers during the baseball season, it would still lose $30,000 to $40,000 per year. That's pretty awful. The main reason why they were losing so much was because of the fact that Cressy just wasn't interested in running the place.
I can think of 100 things I'd rather do than run this bar.
If the owner doesn't care, then why should the customers, right? During the recon, while Taffer and his experts spied on the bar, they realized that even though the building was in a popular area, it didn't stand out very much.
The Dugout, more than you see the bar.
Oh yeah, just kind of blends into everything.
Taffer sent in a local sports writer and his friends as spies, and they were let down by the bar's overall quality. For one, the bartender revealed that they have a shot with a super vulgar name, which displeased the spies when they found out what was in it. Wondering what this was? Hear it from the bartender yourselves.
Made of 4 different types of bourbon, cinnamon, brown sugar, and habanero pepper.
You can't serve something like that to a 40-year-old customer, right? What are they thinking? It's like they're mentally still in college. Anyway, later on, when the customers asked for a burger, the bartender revealed that they only serve them on game days.
Do you guys not have a burger or anything like that?
Only on game days.
Isn't that really odd? I mean, how could they not serve a simple burger at a bar? Back in the kitchen, Cressy was seen making a mess of everything. Unfortunately, he threw the standard hygiene protocols out the window. He dug his bare hands into food and had a fryer that was smoking and foaming up to the brim.
He's touching raw product. Look at the smoke coming out of the oil.
That's the food from the bottom of the fryer.
Taffer and his team also noticed that the place was covered in fruit flies, like literally all over the place. Seeing Cressy at work, it was obvious that he didn't know how to handle things at the bar. When the expert mixologist and chef walked in, they found out how disgusting the kitchen really was.
Disgusting grease that you're cooking food in.
In fact, Cressy was clanking away at the fryer, which was enough to burn the whole kitchen down.
Every time you clang that on top of that fryer, and then eventually this place is gonna catch on fire.
When they eventually confronted him, Cressy just stood there, absolutely unaffected by the expert's opinions of his bar. This guy was not only clueless, and well, you know the drill. If you liked the video, don't forget to drop a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. And if you thought this video was crazy, then make sure to check out the next video right here. It's even better.